Karen, you are deeply embedded in community engagement in the immigrant and newcomer populations. If you could tell us a little bit more about this work and some of the specifics that relate to the mentorship program with nonprofits and partnerships between academics, institutions, and the community-based organizations. And this is not planned, but if there's a way to think about the question in the chat around the difference between what that looked like maybe before and as you're going in this process, how is it changing?
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I feel that a lot of the other panelists have said so many amazing things, and I'm just trying to also put them together into what I'm gonna say because there's so many connections here. I think that for us really, and for me personally, as I mentioned earlier, the 3 impact levels, so the individual, the community, and the organizational, it really starts with that individual perspective of what is my role? And I think that that's what we should all really question. What is my individual role? What is the role of the community? And then what is the role of the organization itself, right? And so within immigrant and newcomer populations, I ask myself, what is my role again? Is it letting go and stepping down? Is it actually like hiring someone who can do this job better than I can? Is it one of these immigrant women that was trained abroad and has all this experience and just hasn't had an opportunity to inhabit this space? So is it letting go? Another role that I can think of is it accompanying these women, accompanying a lot of the immigrant and newcomer populations that we work with? So is it walking alongside them at times to provide that support? Is it more of that mentorship role of, okay, this is how, the system works in Canada. This is how, these are the political structures. And so let's do it together, right? So is that more horizontal relationship? Or I came up with a third role that I also take at times. And as you can tell, a lot of us love to talk about our passions and what we do. And so sometimes it's about speaking out. Not every community member wants to be in a position where they are reliving their trauma and their oppression. And so sometimes they're not willing to speak out, but they want someone to do it for them, right? And so a lot of times is doing that advocacy work. A lot of times is doing deputations at City Hall and coming out and, putting forward the issues that they've communicated to me. So I see it as a very fluid type role because it really depends on the population, on the person, right? On the context. So I think that it really starts with building relationships and trust in community. And so that is really how I navigate, okay, what is the role again of the individual, of the community, and of the organization? And again, it could be hiring practices. So a lot of the women that go through our training programs are being hired to take on these roles and positions within the organization. And that's ultimately my role, I know that I look very young, but I also know that I'm very all over the place and I want to do many things. And so I'm also thinking into bringing this Indigenous teachings of the 7 generations. And so, which is, how am I making decisions right now that are influenced by 7 generations, the 7 generations previous to mine, and then 7 generations ahead of me, right? What have I learned from my ancestors that have brought me here? And also, how am I thinking about 7 generations that are to come? If I want to see more women of color inhabiting these spaces, then what do I need to do? What have I learned? How did I get here? But also, how am I opening up these spaces for others? And so it's really going into what is my role. And then I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about is what's the difference between now and the past when it comes to decolonization. I think, Mohammed, that's a great question. I actually think personally that it's because of people's decisions that decided to disrupt the status quo. It's because of brave, working class women, a lot of, oppressed groups that decided to stand up and said, enough is enough, and we need to change how the next generations are going to go. And there is nothing more for us to lose but our chains, right? So how do we move ahead with just thinking and disrupting the system? So I think that is because of folks like them and hopefully like us that we're disrupting a lot of these systems that change can happen, and these conversations are starting to happen as well. Yeah.
This is really hard work. Like, I'm reflecting as you're speaking about the issue of giving up space, letting go, being better at accompaniment, really reflecting on the relationships and the trust and how to get people further along. So I see in the chat, Tina has commented, maybe perhaps more than asked, about whether these changes are trends. And would we still be having this conversation had not the incidents of the south of the border happened? And yeah, that's a great question. But I think that what you're referring to, Karen, around, nothing more for us to learn, to let go of our change. I think it's important that all of us can take actions and more actions, and we're trying to do so, but much more needs to be done. Maybe I will, again, we're in the last 20 minutes or so of this panel, and the chat, you're welcome to ask questions. I have more questions to ask people, but we'll respond as they come, if that's okay. So I'll come right back to you, Karen, to follow up on this, on how are you incorporating the arts in community-based research, and how does this approach help to decolonize knowledge and strengthen partnerships, if it does?
Sorry, that question was for me. Oh, sorry, can you repeat that? Oh, I stopped hearing you for some reason, Kim.
That's because my mute was on. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit more because I know that you work in incorporating arts in community-based research. So how are you doing that?
Oh, right.
And how does this approach decolonize knowledge and help to strengthen partnerships, if it does at all?
Right. And I think part of your previous question was also a little bit about community and academic partnerships. And so part of what I've said before, how am I bringing myself into a lot of these different spaces, was I'm an artistic person, and that's a passion that I have. And maybe my art is not as beautiful as, Frida's or some other renowned artists, but it is my way of expressing my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, and my experiences. And so realizing that a lot of times we think about the lack of resources and we forget about the strengths that are already in community. And so how am I maximizing the learning experiences and the talents and the skills that community members are bringing in? So we realize that a lot of the women that we work with and the immigrant populations that we work with are amazing artists. whether they are poets or painters or dancers. We really thought about, okay, how do we incorporate that into research? And so part of community-based participatory action research is looking at non-traditional research methodologies. So how are we? Yes, we could do interviews and we could do focus groups and we could do surveys, which are all great, but also we're working with 17 different types of languages. We're working with, hundreds and hundreds of people from different cultural backgrounds. How are we actually targeting universal learning styles in a way, right? And how are we making it fun? How are we thinking about research in this non-colonial way of it's something to be upheld and something to be completely private, and so how are we bringing it back down to what it's supposed to be, which is local knowledge for local community members to change the issues that matter to them, right? How do they take ownership over that? And so we decided to incorporate multiple learning styles. And one of my favorite workshops to do is how to use muralism and graffiti to do data collection and data dissemination. And so we have done a lot of different work with students from the University of Toronto, the Scarborough campus, specifically within the Critical Development Studies program, and the different communities in Toronto where a lot of our program participants are from. And so we're bringing these two communities together, right? The university students and then community members. At the same time, they overlap in a lot of ways, right? A lot of our community members have gone to university in the past, and a lot of the students are immigrants. And so it's creating those connections and breaking down those barriers of the other. And so starting to see ourselves as just connecting with another human being and understanding what their way of learning is. And also being open, I think, as Vida said, or Judy, you were both, I think, talking a lot about education and also active listening. And so it's bringing all of that into those spaces. And so, again, it really is opening it up at the end of the day, opening it up to you decide what methodology you want to use. Because I don't want to tell you to do interviews and surveys and focus groups if that's not what you feel would address the issue that you're passionate about, right? And so we've had amazing topics that the immigrant women that we work with have come up with. For example, accessibility and availability of childcare for immigrant communities in Toronto. And so that was a research topic based on lived experience, based on their community. And so they decided to do a lot of arts-based type of methodologies to gather their information, disseminated their information at City Hall here in Toronto as well, in front of different politicians. Some of them went also on global news to speak about the issue, again, this issue that matters to them. Their presentations were pictures of their kids and pictures of their family being like, this is what I researched, but it influences my life and it's rough. But here is the data, right? So very, very interesting way of like thinking about research, incorporating the arts as a way to decolonize knowledge.
Thank you.